So people are predictably irrational. So if people were irrational and they were irrational in random ways, then we couldn't really make any definitive conclusions, and we really couldn't say, hey, let's make some predictions in terms of what is going to happen and how consumers are going to behave. It would be, an outcome that really would be canceled out, like the irrationality would cancel out, and we would assume that most of the behavior that we see would be based on more rational people. Um, in that case, economic theories that ignored irrational behavior should work out just fine, right? But psychology has shown us that we are irrational in similar and predictable ways. Therefore, irrationality does not cancel out, and therefore it really can't be ignored. And I'll give you some examples of what this means and what this looks like in the coming slides. But just know that we are predictably irrational. And if we are predictably irrational, that means that we should be able to say, hey, if people are predictably going to do X and it's irrational, what could we do to prevent them from doing X, right? Think about it. How many of us have prescriptions that we get on a regular basis? We know that people will not pick up their prescription on time. We know that people will not order their prescription on time. We know that it happens very frequently, right? That's predictably irrational behavior. There's a reason you have a prescription. You need the prescription. What can we do then if we know that people are not picking up their prescriptions on time, or we know that people are not ordering their prescriptions on time? Well, one of the things we can do is create an automatic ordering system, right? Or make the prescriptions easier to order. I know that I go through CVS for a prescription that I have for my skin. And one thing that CVS does is that it makes it super easy for me to reorder the product, because what they do is they just send me a text message and they're like, press 1 if you want to reorder the product. You mean I don't have to log into your system? You mean I don't have to call the pharmacy? You mean I don't have to blah, blah, blah? Oh, sure. Let me do that. Or they will also mail the prescription to me, so I don't have to go and pick it up. Oh, so you mean I don't have to drive or walk to CVS, or I don't have to stand in line when they're seeing a ton of people ahead of me and yada, yada, yada? Oh, I do these things. I click the number 1. I have the prescription sent to me. And you know what? I just have this seamless experience where I don't run out of my prescription. However, if CVS just left it up to me to do the things that, you had to do 20 years ago, chances are very good that I would have days where I've skipped medication, where I haven't taken my medication, so on and so forth. Again, the idea is figuring out ways that we know people will be predictably irrational, and then figuring out ways that we can stave off the outcomes and the issues associated with that behavior. The fact that we are predictably irrational means that our behavior, our predictably irrational behavior, can be viewed in the context of theories that we already have, right? Whether they be psychological theories, maybe they're marketing theories, maybe they're consumer behavior theories, maybe they're economic theories, maybe they're sociological theories, anthropological theories, so on and so forth, to make our predictions more accurate. So a great example of this is smoking. We know that smoking is not great for consumers. It doesn't kill every person who smokes, so I won't kind of go there. But we know that there can be some health consequences. It can kill you. It can it can cause neck cancer. It can cause lung cancer. And we know that, and smokers know, right? So smokers know the Surgeon General's warning. It's on the pack, on the side of every pack of cigarettes. And research has shown that if you ask smokers what the Surgeon General's warning says, they are able to repeat it very accurately. They know what it says, right? You see it every time that you get cigarettes, right? And they know that there's not just one Surgeon General's warning, there are several. Now, the fact of the matter is, That research has also shown, from psychology, has also shown that consumers become less interested in mornings when they see them all the time, right? And this is particularly true of black and white warnings. So if you just have a text warning, people will start to kind of tune out, right? They just tune out from the warning. We also know that images tend to be more eye-catching, more memorable. People pay attention to them more. And for that reason, the FDA has been fighting for years and years at this point to pass and to be able to use images in conjunction with text warnings, right? So smoking can kill you, right? Or the pictures of the lungs, or the picture like this woman that says smoking causes head and neck cancer, and you see this big bulge on the side of her neck. What stopped them, of course, is that tobacco companies have pushed back, and they've done pretty well. And their argument, I think, is a strong one based on our Constitution, and that is you can't compel speech. And tobacco companies have said that by requiring them to use these images, you are compelling speech, and you are compelling speech that is impactful and ruins and can effectively ruin their business. And you might ask yourself, well, what's the difference between this and just the black and white warning? Well, tobacco companies know that people aren't paying as much attention. They don't really, they'll tune out black and white warnings. And tobacco companies will say that part of the issue with images is that you aren't just giving them information, you are literally trying to scare people, right? And the images tend to be scarier and more fear-mongering than just the black and white warning, which has been proven to be true over and over again. And so where does that leave us? Well, other countries have used and currently use warning images. If you've ever been overseas, you've seen them in Europe, and they are quite graphic. They are quite graphic. But how do we know that we should have put images on these warnings? Well, that was just psychology, right? So that what did they know? We knew that people were going to ignore black and white warnings after a certain amount of time. We know from psychology that images are more impactful. They're more fear-inducing, so on and so forth. So we know that people are going to be irrational. They're going to smoke. We know that people are going to be irrational. They're going to ignore text warnings. We also know that psychology gives us some kind of theory on what we can do if people are behaving irrationally and they are ignoring written warnings. Add images, right? And again, this happens all the time. A lot of researchers just inserting theories that we already know to try to kind of stave off irrational behavior. I'm gonna take a moment to talk about some of the reasons why we are so irrational. One is that we have this issue. I'll use the word issue, called bounded rationality. Bounded rationality says essentially we have a limited computational capacity, right? Our memory is only so good, and it gets worse as we age. And we know that if our memory is only so good, the other thing that we can really do is we can focus on weighing the plus and minuses, the pros and cons of a decision. But just like we have a limited computational capacity, we don't really have a great capacity for deliberation. A lot of us are not going to spend a ton of time at the grocery store saying, which one of these cans of soda should I purchase? Should I purchase this one because it has slightly less caffeine, or should I purchase this one? And so we just aren't going to spend a ton of time deliberating over these choices. And so what we tend to do is we develop these rules of thumb that help us figure out what we're going to do, right? We look at these what we call decision heuristics, which we'll talk about in another class. But essentially, these are rules of thumb that help us deal with a complex world. Now, one rule of thumb could be that instead of trying to figure out if the extra 5 milligrams of sodium is worse than the extra 1 calorie or whatever. How do you weigh these things? And how often should you look at the nutrition facts panel, so on and so forth. A lot of what we'll do is we'll just look and see whatever the package says when you first see it. So we'll look at, the information on calories at the front, and we will make a decision based on what the calories say, right? Because we often associate health with caloric information. If we see a product and it says this is healthy, and then it has, this is worth 120 calories, we might truly believe it is healthy. That said, that isn't always true though, right? So I have anemia. It means I have a lower level of energy. I don't particularly care for coffee. I will drink it if I go to a coffee shop to work, but usually I get tea, but I don't really like coffee. One thing that I do like, though, are Mountain Dew Kickstarts, and specifically I just like one version of it. A Mountain Dew Kickstart is actually pretty good because a Mountain Dew Kickstart is only 80 calories, and it has less caffeine than a cup of coffee. And I do find that it helps me get a little bit more energy. However, a Mountain Dew Kickstart is full of sugar. And so if all I did was look at the caloric information, which is likely what I will do if I go to the grocery store, right? Because I'm counting on these rules of thumb, because I'm not going to stand in front of the Kickstarts and weigh every time I go. Is this healthy? Is it not? Is it blah, blah, blah? I'm just going to take the calorie information. I'm going to go from there. We all do this, right? We all do this. Because we use these rules of thumb, we often end up with suboptimal decisions because we didn't take the time and we don't remember everything. We didn't take the time to really think about it, so on and so forth. But being able to use rule of thumb supports fast decisions, and it can, in some cases, support effective decisions, right? Because sometimes calorie information does tell you about the nutritional value of a product, right? Sometimes it does, not always, but sometimes it does, right? And when it works, it works, but when it doesn't, we have suboptimal decisions, and so we're constrained by this bounded rationality. What's really interesting about bounded rationality is that we see evidence that people are often unable to figure out the best available option, even when they know their available options, they know their preferences, and they have all of the information available, right? So you can look at the Cheesecake Factory's menu, which I think is a great example of this. If you've ever been to the Cheesecake Factory, you know the menu is massive. You know what you like. You could be a person who believes that your favorite dish in the world is pasta. Well, unfortunately for the Cheesecake Factory, or unfortunately for you, the Cheesecake Factory might have 12 pasta options, right? And the Cheesecake Factory might even still put, the calorie information right there, right? So you know the available options, you know your preferences, you know that you decided to eat healthy going forward, you decided to start doing that last week. And yet, next thing you know, you're ordering like the jambalaya pasta at the Cheesecake Factory, and the whole thing is like 2,500 calories, right? You have these rules of thumb. I'm going to get what I want. Oh, but maybe I get a half size. That's still kind of a lot of calories for lunch, right? I mean, it's just, we use rules of thumb that don't always support the best decision. And even when we can figure out what's best for us, what's best for me, right? Evidence shows that we often succumb to temptations and end up making bad choices anyway. One of my favorite stories to tell actually happened at McDonald's when I was in my PhD program. So I'm in my PhD program, haven't been to McDonald's in a long time. But one night, I think I left the building at like 1 a.m., something like this. I was writing my dissertation. I was there all night, whatever. I'm starving. I do not want to go home and cook. I don't want to eat a sandwich. So I'm like, I'll just get to McDonald's to serve some French fries, which is always something no one should ever say. You should never say I deserve French fries. But I've said it many a times. Anyway, Anyway, I go to McDonald's and I'm confronted by the calories on the menu, right? So I'm ordering from my car, and on the backlit menu or whatever, I see the calories and I am outraged. I'm like, how many calories is this? There is no way I'm ordering a quarter pounder meal, and I don't even eat cheese. But a quarter pounder meal, that's 1,000 some odd calories. And so I ended up leaving, and I go home and I make the sandwich I didn't want to make, right? Okay. That's not to say I've never eaten McDonald's since then. I had a shock, right? The shock was there. But like most people who go to McDonald's, right? Like the shock wears off. And I didn't go to McDonald's because I think that McDonald's is healthy, right? So now when I go to McDonald's, I go in knowing full well that whatever I pick, or the idea of healthy is off the table when I pull up to a McDonald's. And so I don't even pay attention to the calorie information, because at this point, what's the point? I am dealing with bounded willpower. I am positive I'm not the only person. Bounded willpower is a real thing, and it often kind of helps us to end up with bad or suboptimal choices. Okay, so I mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. Another thing that we're bounded by, is this bounded self-interest, right? The fact of the matter is that we don't always behave in a way that promotes our own self-interest exclusively, right? And economic models that assume that we do are just very incorrect, right? There is actually plenty of reliable evidence of predictably unselfish behavior. We can look at the United States, right? So we are a capitalistic country. I think we all learn from a very young age what capitalism means. You kind of have to. And yet, capitalism would tell us that in a large portion, you're responsible for yourself. You should be looking out for yourself, and primarily looking out for yourself. And yet the U.S. is reliably one of the most giving countries in the world. When there is a worldwide catastrophe, so on and so forth, the U.S. is always willing to open their hearts and also open their wallets for that. I think it was like between 2009 and 2018, the U.S. was the number one country when it came to charitable giving. I think we're now number 3, which is still amazing, or in the top 5 or something like this. We are givers, right? And in a country where the light bill is X and it continues to go up and yada yada, I think there could be some strong arguments for not doing that, but that's just not who we are. And we can look at predictably unselfish behavior, and we can even look at people with a lot more money than me and I assume you. The guys on this PowerPoint slide, if you look at the top guy, you all I'm sure know him, Mike Bloomberg. Mike Bloomberg has a distinction of owning quite a bit of stuff, being a very famous billionaire. You've probably read Bloomberg News. You probably remember him because he ran in the primaries as a Democrat. He ended up dropping out of those primaries. Biden went on to win the distinction. But Mike Bloomberg just gave $1 billion to, I can't remember what the school is, but one medical school, so that doctors who go there, doctoral, or, pre-med students, or med students, can get their medical degree for free. We know that one thing that kind of really stops people from becoming a doctor could be loans. We also know that lots of people will continue to pursue the dream of becoming a doctor, but they do so with a lot of stress, not just with the job itself, but the amount of loans they have to undertake to not only kind of pay for the program, but to pay for themselves throughout the program. The guy on the bottom, Warren Buffett, I'm sure you all know Warren Buffett, you're business students. Warren Buffett, also a billionaire, who is famously frugal. One of my favorite things about Warren Buffett is that he is famously frugal. I think he spends like $9 a day for breakfast. He always gets his breakfast from like McDonald's. You know, he'll wear a pair of shoes for 33 years, you know, this kind of thing. But he's a stock picking genius, and often, you know, people ask him for his advice on stocks. A lot of finance magazines and blogs will actually pay attention to how he rebalances or balances his stock portfolio, you know, uh, this kind of thing. They'll be like, oh, Warren got rid of 50% of his Coca-Cola stock. And people are like, oh, maybe I don't need this Coca-Cola stock, you know, whatever. But Warren Buffett has also been on the front lines of saying that he thinks that billionaires and people with a lot more money should be taxed much more than they are, right? He's said many times that he thinks it's ridiculous that his tax rate is significantly lower than that of his secretary, right? And we could argue that this is predictably unselfish behavior. And this is not to say that people, and it's specifically not to say that these people, billionaires, Mike Bloomberg or Warren Buffett, don't ever engage in self-interest. I think it'd be hard to be a billionaire and never engage in self-interest. But it is to say that there are ways in which we are predictably unselfish as well. And that can run the gamut. I mean, this happens with people who have very little money, and it happens with people who have a lot of money as well, right?